Good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Todd Bensman joins us from the Center for Immigration Studies as terrorists are now in custody, having crossed into the United States on our southern border, been vetted by the Biden administration, and released into the interior of our country. Todd will explain what happened here. Joe Simonson is with us at 4 o'clock. The reporter from the Washington Free Beacon will talk about Joe Biden's disastrous climate and DEI initiatives and how they're very much intertwined. Jonathan Fahey will be here, former federal prosecutor, former acting ICE director under President Trump. He's got some thoughts on all of the big stories this week, from Hunter Biden's conviction as well as these terrorists inside of our country. And Bradley Devlin joins us at 5 o'clock from the American Conservative. He's apparently on a list of targets of Ukrainian organizations that are taking American taxpayer money. A lot of Americans being targeted by this Ukrainian group. We'll tell you more about that ahead at 5. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The United States House of Representatives gearing up for its official contempt of Congress vote today for Attorney General Merrick Garland, because Garland, on behalf of Joe Biden, refuses to hand over the audio of Biden's conversation with Robert Hur, recorded over the course of many hours, in which Joe Biden was so incompetent that Robert Hur concluded that no jury would ever find him guilty, given his lack of ability to think or communicate. That's a bad sign for anybody, but specifically for the President of the United States. A transcript of that conversation has been released, of course. We've seen that, and it doesn't reflect well on Biden. In fact, it makes him look awful. It makes him look like he's very mentally limited. And it once again demonstrated that he lied when he told the public various things, including that it was Robert Hur who brought up the death of his son, Beau Biden, when in fact it wasn't. It was Joe Biden who did that. Biden, who couldn't remember any of the relevant years, whether it was his son's death or his time in office when he was vice president of the United States. A disaster for Joe Biden. And now the Biden administration has been working overtime to block the release of the audio to the American people. We have the transcript. Unless the audio doesn't match it, what's the holdup? What's the holdup? Why not release it? Now, the Justice Department has given us the most absurd possible explanation for why they're not releasing the audio. They say that it would imperil future investigations because nobody would be willing to speak to the federal government and its investigators if audio like this was released. It would put a damper on witnesses being able to speak openly about what they know. Oh, come on. Please. First of all, we have the transcript. Again, unless those things don't match, all we're doing is adding a more rich medium through which we can hear about all of this. Sound. That's it. We're just getting sound. The conversation itself is already public. You can make the same redactions, whatever redactions you made in the first place, if you like, to the audio, but just release the audio. And they refuse to do it. In fact, what's obvious here is that the White House, the Biden administration, at least the people who are trying to drag Joe Biden across the finish line, they know how damaging this is. It's the only conclusion from any of this. The only reason there's any drama around this, they could have checked the box, released this thing. Remember, what do they tell us all the time? You see it pieces in the New York Times, all these various news outlets claiming that Joe Biden is just one of the most thoughtful, deep, lively people behind closed doors. You don't see it in public all the time, but you get that man behind closed doors in an important meeting in the Situation Room, and he is on top of everything. He'll sniff out every issue with every element of the government's work. He's good at sniffing. That they swear he's just so adept at all of this, so agile. And of course, that's not true. So they don't want this audio out there. They're scared to death of what it would do. It would only compound the problems he's having. He's as of this weekend, once again, at an all-time low for his presidency in terms of approval rating. The Economist today projects that Donald Trump has a 2 out of 3 chance of winning the election. Somehow Joe Biden still holding on with about 34% of an opportunity to do it, to win this thing. according to the Economist's assessment. That's in line with a lot of predictions here as President Trump is doing very well in all of the swing states, very well, outpacing easily his 2020 performance in various surveys. He's even made a bunch of states competitive that weren't before. Nevada is an unbelievable thing. Look at Nevada, double-digit leads for Donald Trump. Huge leads. Virginia is neck and neck. The state that they claim leans blue is hardly doing that. So the White House is working aggressively to stop this audio from coming out. They don't want that to happen. And they're willing to go so far as allowing Attorney General Merrick Garland to be held in contempt of Congress. Today, some of the audio from the guys who are moving to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Here's Speaker Mike Johnson.
This week on the House floor, as you heard, Chairman Jordan and our leader and our whip discussed, will be holding Attorney General Garland in contempt of Congress. He is refusing to comply with a lawful subpoena, and that's a problem under Article 1. We have to defend the Constitution. We have to defend the authority of Congress. We can't allow the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, to hide information from Congress. We have important oversight responsibilities, and that is what is being pursued here. As you heard Chairman Jordan say, we have oversight of special counsels as well, and we have a right to know if Robert Hur's recommendation against prosecuting President Biden was warranted. And the best evidence, as Chairman Jordan said, was the audio recordings, because they provide critical insight in what that transcript itself cannot provide. We have to know if the transcript is accurate. And as a former litigator, I can tell you, and many of us know intuitively, that when you have a printed transcript that someone transcribed, you don't know with 100% certainty whether it actually lines up with the audio recording. And that's why this is so important.
Yeah, I mean, look at Joe Biden's remarks in public on a frequent basis. His words don't end up matching the transcripts the White House puts out, right? How frequently has that occurred? The White House has to correct him a lot. And oftentimes they will put in brackets the modifications that they've made. They indicate that they've changed the presentation. But with a guy like Biden, hell, half the time when he is speaking, if you're listening to him speak, it's actually really difficult sometimes to establish what word he just uttered. He'll blur words together. And is it possible a transcript of his remarks doesn't accurately depict the way he sounded? For sure. In fact, more so than any living American politician right now.
The Attorney General doesn't get to decide whether he hides the tape, and that's what will be determined here.
James Comer speaking from the House floor today, of course, in support of holding the Attorney General in contempt of Congress.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the resolution. This is not a complicated matter. The Oversight and Judiciary Committees issued duly authorized legal subpoenas to Attorney General Garland for a certain set of documents, including the audio recordings of Special Counsel Hur's interview with President Biden. The Attorney General has refused to produce these audio recordings. Unlike what my Democratic colleagues keep claiming, this is not just Republicans who need these recordings for their oversight duties. Media outlets, including the AP, CBS, CNN, NBC, and the Washington Post, among others, have filed suit to get these same audio recordings as well. Because the media, like everyone else, knows there's no substitute for a recording of an interview. Not a transcript, not a summary, not the Attorney General's judgment that Congress doesn't need it. The Oversight Committee's investigation of these classified documents has already revealed that the White House's official timeline of events regarding these classified materials left out very important details. For instance, White House employees were entering the Penn Biden Center and moving documents months before the discovery of the classified materials by President Biden's personal attorneys in November 2022. One of those employees was former White House counsel Dana Remus. We issued a subpoena for Mrs. Remus's deposition, but the White House has blocked Mrs. Remus from speaking to the Oversight Committee. The White House has also blocked other White House employees who visited the Penn Biden Center before November 2022 from speaking to us. What is the Biden administration trying to hide? Attorney General Merrick Garland's refusal to produce this evidence establishes a clear pattern of obstruction by the DOJ to cover up President Biden's wrongdoing. President Biden has lied to the American people about his mishandling of classified documents. He has repeatedly denied not knowing about or being involved in his family's influence peddling schemes, which the Oversight Committee can now show has raked in $18 million from foreign individuals and entities for the Biden family members, including President Biden himself. He also met with nearly all his family's foreign associates. President Biden's Department of Justice appears to be taking every step to insulate him from the consequences, whether it's hiding these audio recordings or attempting to give Hunter Biden a sweetheart plea deal to shield Joe Biden from facing accountability for his role in his family's influence peddling schemes.
Right. And this week, what was this past week, what was the big revelation inside of that Hunter Biden courtroom? Confirmation that the laptop, once again, is completely authentic. And the details on that laptop support everything James Comer just said. The role that Joe Biden is playing in his family's business arrangements, all of the money that's pouring into them, 10% for the big guy, I'm sitting here with my father, on and on and on. We'll get into some more of the details on this later, but we've got media outlets today who are begrudgingly admitting that the laptop is real, but still insisting we shouldn't trust it. They're putting themselves into more pretzels than an Annie Ann's right now. It's crazy. It's crazy, but that's our media. That's the way they act. James Comer not alone. Mike Johnson not alone. Andy Biggs also said that this is critical that we get this audio. In fact, if we're going to conduct an impeachment inquiry, we sort of need the evidence to do it.
During his testimony before the House Judiciary Committee, Special Counsel Hur stated that, quote, the evidence and the president himself put his memory squarely at issue, close quote. In his report, Special Counsel Hur noted that during both his and Zwanitzer's interviews with President Biden, the president's memory was significantly limited. President Biden has contested that. The Democrats contest that. But in reality, it's the failure to fully comply with the committee's subpoenas regarding the audio recordings of the Biden and Zwanitzer interviews that has hindered the House's ability to adequately conduct oversight over Special Counsel Hur regarding his investigative findings and the president's retention and disclosure of classified materials, and has impeded the committee's impeachment inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, just think about all of the problems that are baked into this. Biden stole classified information from the United States government over the course of many decades. Both as a United States senator and as sitting vice president of the United States, stole classified information. He recklessly stored it in all sorts of locations, to include his garage in Delaware next to his Corvette. Insisted because he loves his Corvette, therefore that space is safe. I could keep classified information there. I keep my Corvette there. It's all safe. Of course, people without security clearances had access to all of that. Hunter Biden had access to all of that. And we're supposed to say, that's fine, because you're Biden. You can do that. And then in his conversation with Robert Hur, according to Hur, well, the Justice Department can't bring charges against this old man because his brain is broke. It doesn't work. We're not going after this guy. So how can he be president? How can he be president of the United States? And then there's this. So as the House today moves to hold Merrick Garland in contempt for all of this, as they should, Merrick Garland has declared that he is immune from prosecution. Isn't this the best? What a world the left occupies. Hill headline: DOJ memo says Garland cannot be prosecuted for contempt over Biden-Hur audio. So they just get to make up the rules. This is like playground stuff. I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say to me bounces off of me and sticks on you. This is nonsense. He can just arbitrarily make up rules. Sorry, I'm immune from prosecution. So yeah, you can hold me in contempt of Congress. It's irrelevant. Now, of course, we knew in practice that this is how it would work. The DOJ didn't need to release a memo to offer some sort of paper-thin pretext for why they're not going to have a prosecution of Merrick Garland. We've seen this play before. Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress for his lies, for Operation Fast and Furious, for allowing guns to get into the hands of the cartels and to murder a Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry. Yeah, that was fine. And so he was held in contempt of Congress. And what happened to him? Nothing. No prosecution. No consequences whatsoever. Merrick Garland set for the same thing. But he definitely deserves it to be held in contempt of Congress, at the very least. At the very least. And so we have quite of an array of cabinet officials, don't we now? We have the impeached Alejandro Mayorkas, the in contempt of Congress, Merrick Garland, the sitting president who's in the midst of an impeachment inquiry. And all of them deserve it. This is not, making up impeachments like they did with Trump. These are guys who very much deserve far more accountability than Congress can even summon right now. Let's go to the phones. I got Mike calling in from Gainesville. He's on line one. Hello, Mike. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Good to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, certainly there's a workaround to this impasse on the audio tapes. The Congress people should say to the Department of Justice, I know you have a SCIF over there at the Department of Justice. Just let us come over to the SCIF, and we won't have any recordings of the recording, and we won't have any notes. We'll just go in and listen to the recording, and then we can't come out and say that the man sounds like a moron compared to the transcript. But, at this point in time, how do we know that the audio tape of the recording of the interview hasn't already been edited to edit out all the hems and haws and mistakes that Biden made that weren't in the transcript to begin with? They can certainly alter the audio file if they want to make match the transcript.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't. And remember the last time that the Justice Department provided a SCIF arrangement for Congress to check things out, it blew up in the White House's face because, the facts did not help Biden. That FD 1023 form, remember that talked about the Biden bribery scheme? And members of Congress coming out, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she took notes. She walks out and she says, I've got something to share with the American people. So now the White House has decided, you know what? No more scandals of our own making. We're just going to hide stuff from the American people. And that's the pattern they're doing right now. Thanks, Mike. Coming up, I've got Todd Bensman joining us from the Center for Immigration Studies. Terrorists are pouring into our country, and Biden is greenlighting them in. More on that in a moment. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news coming up. Joe Simonson is here from the Washington Free Beacon. Talk about the Biden administration's big climate plans and how they're being screwed up by the DEI initiatives. Isn't that great when all of their radical stuff is causing problems for all the other radical stuff? Jonathan Fahey will be here at 4:30, former acting ICE director under President Trump. We'll talk to him about terrorists coming across the border, being allowed in by the Biden administration, as well as what's going on with Hunter Biden. And then Bradley Devlin will be here at 5 o'clock from the American Conservative, among a bunch of conservatives being targeted by Ukrainian organizations now, attacking people who dare raise any questions whatsoever about the money that we've been sending overseas. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, we have terrorists coming into the country, and it's such big news that even the alphabet networks are all covering it. CBS had this to say last night.
Now to some breaking news. 8 possible terrorists, all foreign nationals, arrested in New York, LA, and Philadelphia. And they came into the country across the southern border. CBS's Errol Barnett has new reporting on what led to the arrests.
8 individuals, all from the Central Asian country of Tajikistan, were arrested in Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia. They entered the United States this year and in 2023, crossing the Mexican border. They were vetted and allowed to remain in the country. CBS News has learned further investigation uncovered the men had possible ties to ISIS-K, the terror group which claimed responsibility for an attack at a Moscow concert hall that killed more than 140 people earlier this year. The FBI used a wiretap to track the men, and sources say what they discovered led authorities to quickly arrest them on immigration charges.
Yeah, among the things they claim that these men were discussing were bombs. Bombs, they say. NBC News is reporting on the subject. Says the suspects had been on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force radar. They were arrested by personnel with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. All 8 men, as you heard from CBS, crossed through our southern border, and their criminal background checks came back clean when they crossed, said 2 officials familiar with the matter. All right, let me pause on this for a moment. What does this tell us about every other person who's crossing into our border? How many millions of people? We don't actually know the answer. How many tens of millions of people have poured into our country during the Biden era? And what do we know about everyone? We know that they dispense with any personally identifiable documents south of our border on the Rio Grande. They throw them out in order to conceal from American officials who they really are, whether or not they have achieved asylum in other locations and everything. Now, we have additional details about the way these guys get in. And really, just this, the emphasis here is that there is no vetting. There's no meaningful vetting here. At least 2 of the men crossed the border in spring of 2023. So they've been here for a while now. And one of those men used the CBP-1 app. That's the Biden administration's app for trafficking people into the country and then claiming that they didn't illegally immigrate. CBP-1. They say the Biden administration created it to allow migrants to book appointments to claim asylum. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force has been aware of a potential terrorist threat originating in Central Europe, and it began monitoring these men as a part of that investigation, 3 sources tell NBC News. A senior U.S. official says the FBI was monitoring the group for several months, kept close tabs on their activities. While they have not been charged with a terrorist connection or a plot yet, the FBI alerted ICE they should be arrested because of potential ties to ISIS. And they were arrested on immigration charges, 2 sources say. They're detained, and they face removal proceedings before an immigration judge. They could later face terrorism-related charges. DHS, the FBI, saying in a joint statement yesterday, quote, over the last few days, ICE agents arrested several non-citizens pursuant to immigration authorities. The actions were carried out in close coordination with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces. The individuals arrested are detained in ICE custody pending removal proceedings. As NBC News previously reported, in April, ICE arrested an Uzbek man in Baltimore with alleged ISIS ties after he had been living in the United States for over 2 years. Yet we've seen a bunch of these. People who were supposedly vetted by the Biden administration, allowed into the country, and then stay here for some time, and then eventually somebody says, wait a second, I'm pretty sure this guy's a terrorist. And they eventually get around to making an arrest or 2. The White House was asked about this today. Corinne asked by reporters about the 8 suspected terrorists, and here's her unsatisfactory answer.
The executive actions last week, over the last 24 hours, there have been a number of reports about suspected terrorists at ports of entry, and then also a sting operation where suspected ISIS terrorists were collected throughout the United States. Do you guys believe so far that the executive actions are working, or is there going to be another announcement down the line with more to do?
So a couple of things. DHS put out a joint statement, so I would refer you to that statement on that particular question that you just asked me about those 8. I believe there were 8 individuals. And we're also grateful for the law enforcement for their quick work on this to make sure that we.
I love this. So you hear her answer. The Biden administration wants credit here. They cleared these guys into the country. They're the ones who conducted the vetting and released them into America. Some of them have been here since at least spring of 2023. And so Corinne is like, man, I just want to say, the Biden administration did a great job. We made quick work of catching these guys. No, you didn't.
American safe.
The question should have been, how come the vetting didn't catch this? What are you going to change about the process? Why are you letting all these people into our country?
This is another example of why we think some calls from Republicans to defund the FBI is a bad idea, is troublesome. God. And so we'll continue to call that out as well. But again, DHS and DOJ put out a statement, a joint statement, so I would refer you to that. As it relates to the executive action the president did last week. Look, just to take a step back just for a second, this is a president that has taken the issue of what we're seeing at the border, the immigration system being broken very seriously. I mean, very, very seriously. That's why he put out a comprehensive legislation on day 1.
I love, and notice that the whole room didn't laugh in unison as she said that. They should have. Let's bring in Todd Bensman now. He's a senior national security fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies and the author of the book Overrun, How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History. Todd, good to have you back with us, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
The problems definitely seem compounded now. I mean, if you've got people coming into the country and then they're vetted and then cleared for entry, and then we later find out over a year and a half later, oh, it turns out they may be terror connected, that's a problem.
Right. Well, this looks like it's going to be a terrorism prosecution. There'll be indictments that'll be unsealed before too long, so we'll know a little bit more about what this was, but it does look like it is a terrorism case. But it's not the only one in very recent times. We just had, I've been on your show about this, a vehicle ramming attack at Quantico Marine Corps base.
Yes.
That nobody is denying was terrorism related. And that Jordanian who conducted that with another one came over the southern border. Also last month, a federal court in Sacramento convicted and sentenced a Russian from an area next door to Chechnya, a very militant Islamic problem area. And he was convicted of providing thousands of dollars to an al-Qaeda group in Syria. He came over the southern border as well. And in the court records, the FBI said that had they not arrested him, he would have gone kinetic. We also have seen the release of probably 7 different immigrants who crossed the border who were on the FBI terror watch list accidentally into the country, released by accident into the country by overwhelmed, swamped Border Patrol agents, even though they flagged on the watch list right through. We are in a period of blinking red lights. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it's not crazy Todd Bensman or right-wing fear-mongering Republicans saying this anymore. It's the FBI director, Chris Wray, constantly, every chance he gets. There was just recently, I think yesterday, published in Foreign Affairs magazine, of all places, a lengthy story about that the threat of terrorist infiltration over the southern border has never been greater.
So wait, so why is it, so the job, insofar as the FBI is involved in prosecuting any of this, is the National Security Division that does that, correct?
Correct. I mean, it would be Joint Terrorism Task Forces.
Yeah. And so why? But the follow-on thought for me is, why are they still prosecuting January 6 people? Why aren't they focused on the actual threats pouring across our border?
Well, I do think. I mean, listen, I'm going to give kudos to the FBI and ICE intel on this one, but I mean, because this looks like it was a close call. I do think that the FBI is probably on this. I mean, it's always good to, that they're not distracted by frivolous kinds of political cases, but they can juggle more than one ball at the same time. I just think that they're going to be increasingly busy. I mean, that case that I just talked about out in California, in all of the DOJ press releases about it, not one time did it mention that guy came over, the Russian came over the southern border. That's how he got in, and then went right to work doing the global jihad. That was a big FBI case. So, thank God for that. I would call that a near miss too. I'd call the vehicle ramming a near miss. It's like we just keep getting lucky and lucky and lucky. Eventually it's going to run out. It just is.
It definitely will. So in the case of Quantico, which again, as you point out, you and I have discussed, have we learned anything else from the Biden administration about the Jordanian nationals who were apparently involved in that?
No. The big story there to me is how in total lockstep all of these agencies are. There are 4 or 5 different agencies, DOD, FBI, ICE, Border Patrol, the White House, so the executive branch, they are all in perfect lockstep on shutting down all access to any information about that case, which tells me, because I've been doing this for a long time, that was a terror attack. And they don't want it known because they don't want to have to acknowledge it, because we're in an election year where the border crisis figures very, very large in the electoral outcome of this thing. You can't just admit to a terror attack from somebody that crossed the border right now. So they're hiding it, and I think they're getting a lot of interference by regular media. Like, everybody should be having FOIA requests out on this. I do. We're going to find out more on this thing eventually. They did charge them with trespassing, so there ought to be documents out there, charging documents for the trespass, in which we can find their names and maybe some narratives. But we're going to probably have to file a lawsuit on that thing, because they are not going to want to give that up to us.
Just to get information on people who would do us harm from our own government. So how vulnerable are we right now? I one of the observations I made just before you came on is that, okay, so now we have yet another case where we have terror suspects being finally taken into custody, but they were cleared into the country. They were greenlit in by the Biden administration. Oh, there was no derogatory information. Let them in. And later they decide, oh, wait a second, actually we should take them into custody. What does this say about the vetting process for all the other tens of millions of people who've come into our country since Biden's been in office?
Well, here's the problem, and let me just keep it for the moment on terrorist crossing. It's that we, for 20 years, have had programs in place down there where we take people from places like Tajikistan and we tag them as special interest aliens. We put them in detention, and then we send an FBI agent in, or an ICE intel officer down to do an in-depth eyeball interview with them. We've been doing that for years. We endeavor to do that on 100% of all of them, because they're coming in with no ID, usually just saying, my name's Mickey Mouse, right? Believe me. So we were doing that for a very long time. That program is completely vaporized by the mass migration crisis. They are not doing any of those interviews anymore. And so because of that, I believe our threat is very, very much elevated. I just published about an hour ago a piece in the New York Post pointing out, it's just up, it's fresh up as an op-ed, pointing out that the Biden administration's Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, in his final months was so freaked out about special interest aliens that he ordered up a whole of government effort to bear down on all special interest aliens coming across the border and to knock out their smugglers abroad. And this thing was put in place. I've got the memo linked. This was a Democrat, a party stalwart Democrat, who put this thing in place. His program started up, but then it didn't survive the election and the transition. And my point that I make in this is that we need to, first of all, resurrect what Jay Johnson was trying to do. He was a Democrat, but so what? There is no greater nonpartisan matter than this. Democrats had a good idea. Republicans need to take it. Biden, if it was good enough for Obama, it ought to be good enough for Biden, and then maybe Trump in a few months. But my point is that regular, normal Democrats have always been worried about this and have often done the right thing. And Jay Johnson did that, and I'm just pointing that out in my New York Post piece today.
I'm looking at your New York Post piece now. There's some numbers that leap off the page at me. You say that special interest alien traffic over the border had previously been somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 individuals on an annual basis. But you say now that since 2021, we've reached an unimaginable 70 to 80,000 special interest aliens per year?
That's right. And when it was 3,000 and 4,000 a month, we couldn't get to all of them. We endeavored to, but we couldn't get to all of them for the interviews, and searching their pocket trash and going extra miles to find out who they are. With 80,000 a year, forget it. This thing is gone. I testified before Congress in September on this very issue. I told the Judiciary panel exactly what was up, that this program is vaporized under the weight of volume, the counterterrorism program that has been so useful and valuable. And I wasn't the only one on the panel testifying with me was the former chief Border Patrol agent who said that they are doing no interviews now down there. Nobody's doing interviews, and they're just letting them all in. So, of course, you're going to have Tajiks running around plotting some kind of bombing or who knows what it was. I'm not surprised whatsoever. And that they didn't show up on any database because you have to eyeball them and spend 6 hours in the tank with them trying to figure out what they're really all about. I know about this because I worked for 10 years almost with the Texas Department of Public Safety, Intelligence, and Counterterrorism Division, and this is what we did. We went down there and we were doing the interviews right alongside all the feds, and we were all complaining even then that we couldn't get to all of them, and they would have to bond out. They'd bond out of detention at some point or be released at some point on an asylum claim. 80,000, forget it. Never happening.
Yeah, it never had to happen either. The Biden administration made this happen. Todd Bensman, thank you from the Center for Immigration Studies. Thank you for the update on this. We're going to stay in touch with you on this very important topic. Thank you, sir. How do Border Patrol agents feel about all of this? Well, we've got some audio from one coming up. We'll share that with you and so much more on the Vince Coglianese Show.